Bel Air, California. This is not just a place, but a symbol. Winding, immaculate roads, shaded by ancient trees, hide behind them multi-million-dollar mansions, each a private fortress protected by high walls and state-of-the-art security systems. This is where dreams are built with money, and secrets are buried beneath gardens tended with more care than museums. But sometimes, secrets don't stay buried forever. One day in May 2024, during the renovation of a newly sold mansion's garden, a gardener named Miguel dug up something more than just weeds. His shovel struck something hard. At first, he thought it was a rock, but as he cleared away the soil, a small, stark white object was revealed. He picked it up, brushing off the damp earth. It had a strange shape. He dug a little more and found two similar pieces. That discovery awakened a case that had been cold for 8 years. Detective Isabella Rossi of the LAPD Cold Case Unit stood before the small pit, looking down at the 3 small bones. She had a reputation in the department, someone who could hear the whispers of the past. Rossi didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed that every crime leaves a trace, no matter how small. The report from the forensic lab delivered the first shock, turning a mystery into a nightmare. The 3 bone fragments belonged to 3 different people: the wife of the late millionaire Julian Croft, Eliza, a genius programmer named Leo Vance, and finally, Sarah Jenkins, an investigative journalist. All 3 had vanished without a trace about 8 years prior, after having dealings with Julian. The prime suspect, Julian Croft, was believed to have died from a sudden heart attack a year ago. The case file on Julian was all but closed. But Rossi, with her experience, didn't believe in coincidences that were too perfect. She formed a special investigative team. Their mission: to reconstruct Julian's entire life. The initial investigation hit a wall of silence erected by 2 people. The first was Genevieve Croft, Julian's sister. She lived in a penthouse overlooking the entirety of Los Angeles, cold and distant. "My brother is dead. Let him rest in peace," she said, but her eyes betrayed a fear she couldn't hide. Rossi noticed her hand trembled slightly as she poured tea. Why was she afraid when the supposed culprit was dead? The second and most formidable wall was Marcus Thorne. He was more than just the head of security. His file showed Marcus was a former Special Forces soldier recruited by Julian after he was discharged under difficult circumstances. Julian had given Marcus a new purpose, a new life, and in return, Marcus gave him absolute loyalty built on gratitude and adoration. Marcus didn't just protect the property, he protected Julian, the man. During interrogations, Marcus was an expert at masking his emotions. He sat upright, his gaze steady, answering every question articulately, but without feeling. Mr. Croft was a good man. He was misunderstood. But Rossi noticed that every time Eliza's name was mentioned, Marcus's jaw would clench almost imperceptibly. It was a sign of suppressed hatred. Rossi's team was undeterred. They began a parallel investigation, one team focusing on relationships, the other on physical and financial evidence. They dug into financial records and discovered Julian's purchase of an industrial-grade wood chipper and composter, an oversized piece of equipment for typical gardening needs, right after Leo Vance disappeared. A horrifying theory began to form. The bodies weren't buried, they were destroyed. They also found a crucial detail about Julian's death. The death certificate was signed by a private doctor, Alan Carmichael, who had promptly retired and moved to Costa Rica immediately after. No official autopsy was ever performed. Everything was too quick, too neat for the death of a billionaire of his stature. Rossi felt something was wrong. She made a bold decision: investigate Julian Croft as if he were still alive. A financial crimes expert on her team began tracing the money flow from Julian's empire. And then, after weeks of following faint trails through dozens of shell companies, they found it. An active account in a country with no extradition treaty. Small, almost untraceable withdrawals were still being made every month. Julian Croft was alive. His death had been faked. Rossi invited Marcus Thorne to the interrogation room once more. This time, she didn't bring the case file. She placed a single photograph on the table. A blurry image from an ATM security camera in the Cayman Islands, showing a man with Julian's build withdrawing cash. "Let's talk about loyalty, Marcus," Rossi began. "But not loyalty to a dead man." Marcus stared at the photo, his expression unchanged, but Rossi saw a small muscle twitch in his temple. "Let's start with Leo Vance," Rossi said, her voice even but heavy with implication. He was the brain behind Julian's initial success. He wrote the algorithm, but Julian got the glory and the money. When Leo decided to claim what was rightfully his, Julian, a man who never accepted being challenged, invited him to the mansion to negotiate. But it wasn't a negotiation, was it, Marcus? It was a purge. Julian, in the narcissistic rage of a slighted king, struck him down. Perhaps a blow with a heavy object in the library. An unplanned, furious death. And you, the loyal soldier, were there to clean up the mess. Rossi paused, letting her words hang in the stuffy air of the room. That wood chipper, it was purchased right after Leo disappeared. A convenient coincidence. You turned a human being into fertilizer for Julian's prized roses. Marcus remained silent, but his hands, resting on his thighs, clenched into tight fists. Next came Sarah Jenkins, Rossi continued, giving him no time to recover. She was a mistake, an unforeseen variable. She was too smart, too persistent in her investigation into Leo's disappearance. She found the connection, got too close to the truth. Julian couldn't let her destroy his image. This time, it wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was calculated. Julian invited her over, perhaps under the guise of providing an exclusive tip. A glass of wine, a bit of tasteless, odorless poison, much quicker and cleaner. And once again, Marcus, you were the janitor. And then there was Eliza, Rossi said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with false sympathy. This was the real tragedy, wasn't it? She wasn't a fool. She lived with that monster every day. She saw what Julian was capable of. Perhaps she found something of Sarah's that you missed during the cleanup, Marcus. A pen, a notebook, something small but significant enough to connect the dots. She wasn't planning to leave him for a lover. She was planning to expose him. And in their final confrontation, in their own home, Julian did what he always did. He silenced her forever. Julian killed them, didn't he, Marcus? All three of them. And you, the loyal soldier, used that chipper to erase your master's sins. Finally, the stone wall crumbled. Marcus confessed everything, including helping Julian fake his death so he could escape. "So why the 3 bone fragments?" Rossi asked the final question. "Why lead us to the crime yourself?" Marcus's voice trembled with failure. "I missed something. During the cleanups, I missed a few things. Maybe a tooth fragment, a strand of hair, buried deep in the soil. I knew the new owners would eventually landscape the entire garden. They would find it by accident. The investigation would start again, and this time they would know Julian wasn't dead. They would hunt him. I couldn't let that happen," Marcus continued, his voice filled with desperation. "So I created a false scene. I took 3 bone fragments from the mementos I had kept. I buried them in a place they would be easily found. I wanted you to find them, investigate, and come to one conclusion. Julian Croft was the killer, and he was dead. I wanted you to close this case yourselves, forever. I was willing to go to prison to ensure his freedom." Marcus's act wasn't a mistake. It was a final gamble, a final, twisted act of sacrificial loyalty. Marcus's confession turned a cold case into a global manhunt. With the cooperation of Interpol and intelligence agencies, Rossi's team began to track Julian. They knew Julian was intelligent, meticulous, and had nearly limitless financial resources. He moved constantly between non-extradition countries, using multiple false passports and altering his appearance. The hunt lasted for 6 grueling months. Rossi's team analyzed every financial transaction, every satellite call, every blurry security camera image. They realized Julian had one unbreakable habit. He still secretly monitored and manipulated the stock market, the addiction of a man hooked on power. That was his weakness. Rossi and her team laid an elaborate trap. They created an irresistible investment opportunity, a new tech company with inflated promises, and leaked the information through channels they knew Julian would be watching. The trap was sprung. Julian, in his arrogance, couldn't resist the bait. He executed a large trade through a third party in Geneva, Switzerland, a country with a strong judicial cooperation treaty with the United States. The moment the transaction was confirmed, his location was compromised. Rossi didn't wait. She flew to Geneva with a tactical team. On a cold winter morning, they raided a luxurious villa overlooking the lake. Julian Croft, no longer the powerful billionaire, but a tired, aging fugitive, was arrested as he sat in front of his computer, completely blindsided. The day he was extradited back to Los Angeles, the sky was as gray as his future. Faced with irrefutable evidence and Marcus's testimony, Julian Croft finally had to bow to justice. As the courtroom doors closed, ending the trial that sentenced Julian to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Detective Rossi felt a sense of relief. The case of the 3 bone fragments was truly closed. Sometimes, to hide one monster, people are willing to create another. But the truth, no matter how it's buried or twisted, will eventually find its way to the light. Justice had been served, not just for the 3 victims, but for the truth itself.